Breathing. It's something that every human does instinctively, but it's amazing how many times I get asked about breathing. My breathing isn't right, I can't get it. So what if I told you that mastering your breathing could actually improve your running performance and make running feel easier? Now, that's not just for newer runners, that could actually be for more advanced runners too. There are some advanced runners that really will benefit from some of these tips I'm going to give in this video. So I saw a stat that there is up to 40% of runners experience breathlessness or dyspnea, as it's called, limiting probably their enjoyment and performance. So today I am going to dive into some evidence-backed breathing techniques, hype or fact, and some breathwork strategies that can transform your running. So the first one, because it's doing the rounds a little bit, nasal breathing. Nasal breathing means inhaling and exhaling exclusively through your nose whilst running, whilst living. There are advocates who claim that nasal breathing can enhance oxygen efficiency, reduce breathlessness, and even calm your nerves. And I do agree with that bit. But, you know, what does the science say? Recent research shows that runners can adapt to nasal breathing. Correct, true, even at relatively high intensities. And I have actually seen that, like Kim Collinson, for example, who just won the Northern Traverse, had enlisted the oxygen advantage, who is Patrick McGilligan, I think it is. And anyway, there is one study that showed after just a few months of practice, runners could match their mouth breathing performance with nasal breathing, but needed significantly less air to maintain their pace. The concept is that nasal breathing, which can also boost nitric oxide production, which then helps buffer lactate and helps dilate airways and blood vessels, potentially improving oxygen delivery to the muscles. However, there's a limit. At very high intensities, mouth breathing quite simply just becomes essential to meet the oxygen demands. There was also evidence that showed that whilst it took only a few months, you needed to do it quite a lot in those few months for the adaptations to happen. Not just on your runs, we're talking about pretty much all day, taping your mouth. What is the practical takeaway here? Well, recommendation from my side is that practice nasal breathing, fine, but do it during your easy runs. Maybe moderate, but probably not. Start small, build gradually, but don't hesitate to switch mouth breathing during harder efforts or races, or just quite simply. In fact, Arthur Lydiard, the great marathon coach, he said something like, get as much air from wherever you can as possible. And I would kind of agree with that. You know, oxygen is part of our fueling system. We need that oxygen. So don't rely just on nasal breathing. Get it through your mouth as well. Next thing is diaphragmatic belly breathing, which is basically breathing deeply into your belly. Helps you maximize each breath by engaging your diaphragm fully, which then improves oxygen intake, uptake, and it can reduce the breath frequency needed. Runners who use diaphragmatic breathing do often experience better running economy, which means they use less oxygen at the same pace and delays fatigue. It also reduces the likelihood of side stitches, apparently. I would agree with that, just anecdotally. You know, if you get a side stitch, I tend to find that that really deep diaphragmatic breathing does help because it stabilizes your core and your posture and just helps to kind of relax things. Recommendation from my side would be practicing belly breathing exercises outside of runs, lying on your back and focusing on expanding your abdomen as you inhale. You know, then go and integrate that into your running, especially if you're feeling fatigue or stress, if anything like that kicks in. But again, it's going back to that Arthur Lydiard quote I mentioned. You know, get as much air from wherever you can as possible. And something, I'll talk about this in a little bit more, but something I really sort of focus on, particularly on my harder efforts, is getting as much air in, right down into the belly, and then getting out as quick as possible so I can get the next breath in. And I'll come on to this in a bit. Next up would be rhythmic breathing. So this is where I'm going to talk about that. So rhythmic breathing, this means syncing your breath with your stride. And there are so many ways of doing this, and you need to find out what works for you, because I don't think there's any one way of doing this. Examples are like inhaling for 3 steps, exhaling for 3 steps. That technique can improve running efficiency. It uses the body's natural motion to aid breathing. I think I probably do the 3-3 instinctively on easier to moderate runs. But yeah, runners who, sort of maintain a rhythmic pattern do tend to report feeling calmer, less fatigued, more focused. There are some uneven patterns like a 3-2 rhythm, which you then alternate foot strike impact, and there can be benefits from doing that. My recommendation on this is that you find a breathing rhythm that feels natural, and do it on your easy runs to start with. My wife is actually training for a 10K at the moment, and for anybody who's watched these videos of mine before, you'll know that she has cancer, so her fitness isn't amazing, but as she builds up to this 10K that she's doing, which is actually tonight, she has said to me, I really sometimes struggle to find my breathing. That's usually because running too hard. Slow it down, calm it down, try to get in a rhythmic, like trying a 3-3 or even a 4-4 pattern. And then for your harder efforts, shift to something like a 2-2. So breathe in for 2 steps, out for 2 steps. I actually do something more like a 2-1, and I do it like this. I go, so step 1-2, breathe in, 1-2, 1-2. And that helps me get lots of air right down into my belly, that diaphragmatic belly breathing I was talking about. And then I go, breathe out quickly. So, and particularly if I'm doing something like a 5K or, really hard interval, that works great for me. If side stitches are an issue with you, then experiment, with a 3-2, 4-4, 4-2, whatever rhythm. Try and get as much air down into your belly as possible. The Wim Hof method, I'll touch on that really quickly. Breath hold techniques. The Wim Hof method, it involves cycles of rapid breathing in and out, followed by breath retention. Proponents of it, Wim himself, suggest that it boosts resilience, oxygen delivery, and even mimics training altitude. Whilst this method, it can affect physiology. For example, short-term effects, for example, that it apparently increases red blood cells and adrenaline. I've done it before. It certainly makes me feel a little bit woo. You start getting all lightheaded and it can be quite fun. You've got to be lying down to do it. But it hasn't conclusively improved running performance in scientific studies. No matter what Wim Hof says. However, I do know people that find it valuable for mental toughness and recovery. It can, like a lot of breathing techniques, it can help with just settling down the nervous system. So my recommendation here with Wim Hof breathing, definitely keep it separately from your runs. Don't try and do it on your runs. Don't try and hold your breath whilst you're running. Stupid idea. Or driving a car or anything like that. Maybe do it as part of your recovery or mental training routine, something meditative, for example, but definitely avoid practicing it directly before or during running because of those risks of feeling woozy, quite honestly. Respiratory muscle training. So what's that all about? Respiratory or inspiratory muscle training. There are devices out there like Power Breathe. I actually have one here. It's called AeroFit. And the whole premise behind it is that you can set different strengths. There's got these dials on the side. And what it does is as you breathe out, breathe in, you can set the different strengths on it, and it can strengthen your diaphragm and respiratory muscles. And the idea behind that is that if you have stronger diaphragm and respiratory muscles, you need less oxygen for those muscles, and therefore more oxygen will go to your working muscles as you're running. And actually, consistent use of RMT devices have shown improvements in endurance performance, has shown reduced breathlessness and enhanced oxygen efficiency. Research suggests that RMT can yield significant performance gains. So I would actually recommend these, particularly in races with high breathing demands like hill running or ultras, or there are a lot of cyclists, the Tour de France guys use it. So my recommendation, consider incorporating it. They're not cheap. I think this was like £200, so not cheap, and it comes with an app and it will guide you through things, but consider incorporating it into your training if you are nailing everything else. Particularly if you're competing in challenging environments like altitude or heat. Typical protocols might involve daily practice for quite a long time. Any of this sort of stuff with breathwork is going to take a long time. It's not a quick thing that you do 2 days before a race. So yeah, there you go. Maintenance sessions are going to help you retain benefits. So in conclusion, breathing isn't just daily survival. Whilst it is very important, it can be a powerful performance tool. It can be helpful for nervous system recovery. That has been shown, and I would agree with that. I think, sometimes when I'm feeling a bit fatigued and I do my breathwork, it does feel like it calms me down. But yeah, by integrating some of these techniques into your running, into your training, you can potentially run stronger, run longer, with less gasping for breath. And as legendary coach Arthur Lydiard said, I've just remembered the exact quote, breathe through your mouth, nose, or even your ears, whatever it takes. That's what he said. The key is knowing how and when to breathe effectively. And if you found this helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop any questions below, and even let me know what you think. Happy running.